I'm actually using some art from one of the artists. He's actually here, Alex McLeod, so hopefully he's not going to rip me a new one in terms of how I've used his artwork here. I wanted to talk to you today. This is me when I was probably about 6 or 7 years old. And I wanted to I'm going to stand at the podium, and I'm also going to use my iPhone as a prompt because I'm a technology kid. I wanted to talk to you about sort of what, obviously in putting this presentation together, just thinking about what I was like at your age. There's a little bit of cringing in terms of, I went to an art school, and I was a lot like Max Fisher from Rushmore, where I was actually, it's interesting kind of going back and thinking about it because in putting this together, I kind of thought about where I thought I would be when I was this age, which I'm old now, so it's unfortunate. But I'm actually not that far off, which I think the only reason I'm not that far off was probably because I was pretty ignorant in terms of like what the rules were. So I just kind of did what I wanted. You can kind of see from that picture, I was really hard as a kid. I didn't think too much about sort of how I was going to get there. I just kind of did things. And everyone always says to me, like, how'd you get to where you are? And I don't know. Like, it makes sense, I think, when I go through it as a story, but I was relentless. And I think, when I was a kid, I'll go to the next slide. There's me being bossy. When I was a kid, I made things up. I had imaginary friends. I used to do dance shows in the living room. I would pretend that I could dance like Mike until my parents got bored and walked away. I used to pretend that I could skateboard. I was always pretty out there, and I was an only child. In high school, I went to an art school, as I said, so I directed plays, I wrote plays, I was always doing clubs and creating stuff, and I remember not loving high school, which is interesting because I think that's kind of a theme today where a lot of us didn't like school. But I fast-tracked through school. I just needed to get out as soon as possible. And I remember people saying to me at the time, why would you want to do that? High school is the best time of your life. And I thought, I sure hope not. I really hope not. So ended up going to film school after high school, and I really wanted to be a director and make movies. And then when I got to film school, I realized that most people were there to drink and not to make movies. So I started making experimental film. And I think the irony of film school to me was I just didn't find it collaborative enough. I'd come from an art school where everyone was totally engaged in making stuff, and all of a sudden people weren't engaged anymore. And I think for me, and not engaged to the level that I was, which people ask me how I do all the things I do, and I don't know. I just do them. I have all kinds of projects on the go at any given time. And I think looking back, I think figuring out what I was good at and then what I was supposed to do after high school was really just, if I look back at it and sort of look at it analytically, it was a matter of doing more of the stuff I liked doing and doing less of the stuff that I didn't like doing. And I think that's sort of, what my, it seems simple enough, but I think that's really what the motivator has been for me throughout my career, is just focus on the stuff I like doing. And there's other people, and I think that's the thing for me in terms of collaboration. There's always going to be someone out there who can do the stuff you don't want to do, and some people like the stuff that you don't like, which is great. So I think, it's doing more of what you like and less of what you don't. But in saying that, I think there's still stuff that needs to be done. And I think that's the magic part is, finding those people to do the stuff that, they like and the stuff that you don't. And this is funny because I think, when I was a kid, I'm an executive producer by trade now. And when I was a kid, that was just called being bossy. So if you're a bossy kid, you might be a really good executive producer. This is the thing for me that I really learned, and I've had the pleasure of working in a lot of amazing places. I worked for CNN, I worked for UATV, I've worked for a lot of great advertising agencies, and as soon as I got into the work world, I worked with a lot of great people, don't get me wrong, but I basically figured out that it wasn't as collaborative as I expected, and believe me, I have not always been collaborative. As I said, I'm an only child, so, I was bossy, but I think the thing that I learned in going out there into sort of the rat race or the working world was that I figured it out, and I'd sort of figured it out, I think, when I was a kid, but I figured it out and really kind of proved the hypothesis, is that, people are wired to compete. And I think the thing, and I don't think it's our fault, and, we can't blame society or our parents or whatever, but I think, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think it takes the focus away from the fun part, which is the team. And I think we'd all agree, whether you're playing sports or whether you're in a band or whether you're doing a play or whatever it is that you like to do, there's that dynamic that starts to happen when you're with other people. And the thing I always say, and I joke about it with people where, you're telling a story about something and someone will one-up you and go, well, I did this or that. And I always say it's not a contest. And I think it's, to me, and I actually photoshopped this myself because it's not a contest. I think, and that's what I realized. I think when I was sort of starting out in my career, there's a lot of this, wanting to sort of keep things to yourself. And I work primarily in the digital space. And, I didn't wake up knowing how to do this. I learned from people who helped me and who mentored me, and people who, and I think it's funny, both my parents just texted me and said, where do we watch this? Which is funny because, again, as I told you, they would often leave in the middle of my performances because I was winging it. So I think there's something that happens when you're on a team, and again, you get this connection. And I think when I got into the work world, there was a lot more politics than I had expected. And I remember thinking, if I ever have my own company, it's not going to be like that. And I think, I didn't understand why there was such a lack of talking, because talking seemed like a pretty simple thing. But I realized there was a lot of sort of delineation within the working world where people, you didn't get access to the people who could actually make change. And when I became a manager, I actually became a manager of teams when I was about 23 years old. And I remember thinking that, the most important thing I could do was get to know the people on my team so that I would know where to put them. And how that they could support the department and me and the company. So that was where I really learned, I think, to be able to, a team is only as strong as the members of it, and obviously you have to know the team, but I think what's more important is knowing the individuals. And I think that's, I've incorporated that into everything that I've done, and I think, although I've been sort of lauded for my own career, I wouldn't have been able to do any of the things that I've done without the team that surrounds me. And I really think, and my company is completely, it's run as a completely flat organization. I'm the president, but I'm also on the ground and I'm doing all the communication with everybody. And I think, to me, that's the most important thing that I can do, because on a daily basis, I'm having a dialogue with my clients and it tells me what they want, and I'm going to make sure that they get what they need. And I think, again, I thought that politics made no sense. And I started thinking about, because I'm analytical, about the things that we sort of do every day that require collaboration and why there wasn't more of it. And all these things that were hugely successful. If we think about Wikipedia, which is probably the, biggest example of collaboration that there is. I mean, it's a bunch of people who collaboratively are creating, a huge, almost encyclopedia of information. Or Facebook. I mean, what if everybody just left Facebook? It'd be pretty boring. You'd get a lot less updates. Maybe that would be a good thing. But in terms of sort of thinking about that, it really taught me that, the internet was a different kind of medium. And it taught me that, you could be a kid down the street talking to the president of a bank, because it didn't matter, you had this persona. And you're able to actually communicate, in real time, which to me, that sort of changed everything. And that was where I think when I left school, and I actually had quit school, and my parents were, I think, looking at me like, what are you going to do now? And I didn't know. I just knew that I wanted to go and do something different, and I wanted to work online, which at the time, working on the internet was not a job. And it's, luckily, it's barely become one now. But I think I like the idea of, being able to have that dialogue with all those different people. And it's still funny. I mean, people say to me, how did you meet all these people that you know? And I have a pretty huge social network, but to me it was always, if I liked something that someone was saying, I would talk to them. And I think, it sounds so simple, but I think talking obviously is the way to solve pretty much any problem. And it's definitely, I mean, all the people that I know in my life and that have, helped me to do the things that I do, it's really been through just interest and engagement. And, everyone's doing interesting stuff and actually being inquisitive about it. And I think that's where I still, I'm still like a 7-year-old. I have a playroom at my house. I collect a lot of stuff. And for me, it's always just about sort of keeping it interesting. And I think, if we think about all the things that we do on a daily basis that require, collaboration to exist, and certainly everything I do professionally and personally, we wouldn't be able to do any of the things we do without, community engagement. So I think, and I said this earlier, but I think it's important to remember, this is some of my stuff, so I'm just going to show it to you. But I think for me, it's important to remember that collaboration and corroboration are not the same thing. And I think, again, if you think, and I mean, I wasn't always, as I said, collaborative. There were times when, you know, it's about encouraging people to do things, and you can definitely provide people with direction to do things, but I think the end product is a lot better, obviously, when you're listening to other people. And I think you guys learned that earlier with the exercise you did with the Science Center. I think, you know, everybody's got different goals, and I think it's yes and I think that's what I've tried to accomplish. I mean, being a producer, you're managing all kinds of different people, you know, from artists to directors to, you know, web developers. And to me, the only reason I'm able to do that so successfully, and I think the only reason that the work has been so great, is because we listen to each other. You know, and at the end of the day, you've got to have structure. But I think if you think about it, you know, if someone's being encouraging towards you, you're going to probably work better than if someone's, you know, breathing down your neck. So, and I think, I mean, we've sort of talked about, so I'm just kind of illustrating what collaborations is. So it's, you know, that plus this equals people. So I think, you know, knowing those individuals as people and professionals fosters an environment that you can't help but be creative in. And I think a really good example of team is somebody like, you think about somebody like Tim Burton or Quentin Tarantino, who they have a lot of the same people in all their movies. That's not a mistake. You know, they've gotten to a point where they have these relationships that they're leveraging, and they probably barely need to talk when they're on set anymore. And I think you guys know, if you played on a sports team, or, you know, if you've been working on a production, as I said, where you get this dialogue where you don't even need to talk anymore. And I think individuals can still collaborate. You know, and I think because of that desire to be creative, but in the digital age, I think just due to the medium, because it's just the nature of the beast, is that collaboration is king. And, you know, real collaboration when it comes to something else isn't a science, it's a privilege, and I really believe that. And again, I think for me, it's one of those things where I think the difference between, and there's actually a quote in your program, which is funny because I'm going to say it, but the difference between bad and good and great, I think, is only a few things. And I mean, anybody can have an idea, and I'm sure you've seen this, where somebody has an idea, but there's this whole idea of circumstance getting in front of you and you're not able to actually execute it. But I think the important thing to remember is that, you know, if you have talent, if you have passion, which we've talked a lot about today, but self-knowledge is really important. Anyone can have a good idea, but it takes those things to be able to actually make it come to life. And I think that's the differentiator. And, you know, life is too short to be mediocre, and I think you have to pursue things relentlessly. And the one thing that I've learned, and I think when you're going out into the career world and you think about, you know, making money, et cetera, and the one thing that I can tell you, which I wish someone would have told me, you know, 10, 15, however many years ago, is that money really is a side effect of doing great work. It is, you know, and I think if you're in the pursuit of money solely, you're not gonna be as successful or fulfilled, and you're not gonna have fun. However, you know, when you're in an environment where you're really doing something you love and you're working with people who are there to support you, and we talked about sort of the individual nuts, and I certainly am an individual nut, but I have a lot of other nuts around me. You know, and money and success are certainly a side effect of that. And I think it's also about, you know, investing in those things and looking at new opportunities. And I'm one of those people who, whenever people ask for a meeting with me, I always do it, because I remember the people who gave me a chance, and I also remember the people who said, you don't have any experience. And to me, I think that's sort of the greatest thing I can impart today. And I think there's a quote by George Bernard Shaw that basically talks about circumstances and those people who, you know, you can't go out there and look for circumstances. Those who find them make them, and I think that's the important thing. If you look at all the sort of the deck being stacked, a lot of times you don't necessarily have the opportunity to do things unless you actually, you know, grab the bull by the horns and pursue it relentlessly. And I've had interns and other people who've worked with me who've just spent the day with me, and I think, you know, and those have been sort of the big moments in my career where I look back, and I mean, as I mentioned, I worked at CNN, and they gave me a chance. And I didn't have any experience. They gave me a chance. And I've always sort of imparted that going forward. So I'd love to impart that in you guys today. And I think, you know, it's really important to stay close to the people around you and listen to the people around you, because, I mean, we really are better together. And that's about it. I mean, I just really wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about my experience and tell you that people are important. And thank you very much.